to me, talk to me. I love the things you say. Talk to me, talk to me.
Welcome to Dialogue, KSFR's weekly Friday evening call-in show, where the conversation starts with you. I'm your host, MK. This week, I've decided to do something a little different. I took the show on the road. In formulating the original concept for this show, it was all about giving you, the listener, a voice. And in particular, I wanted to bring the voices to the table that are all too often unheard, those that go unseen, unrecognized, invalidated. I happen to believe that everyone has something valuable to say, and especially those who are the most invisible. In the hustle of our hyperactive, multitasking, deadline-driven world, I also believe in the value of not reacting when we hear something that goes against our own thinking. It's not an easy thing to do, and if anyone knows that, it's me. And it's especially difficult to do if we're invested in the opposite of what we're hearing. But if something is difficult for us to hear, I think it's important to ask ourselves why. What is our reaction saying about ourselves? Is it touching off our own anxiety, fear, maybe even guilt? And how can we learn to put those feelings into words that can help make us better people, more accountable, in even just our own individual way, instead of rushing to judgment and blame or outright dismissing the other person? After all, isn't there always more to the story? To everyone's story. And we all have one. Isn't the most important piece finding the humanity in our stories so we can connect, make amends, and forgive instead of just hate? And finally, there's also value that can come from listening. And we can't have any real productive conversation without learning to listen and bring in the value of what everyone has to say. So this is what this show is about, equalizing the playing field, giving time to step back, stop, and hear someone else's perspective, even if it's different than your own. It's about practicing the art of listening. It's not a bad habit to get into. So, if you feel you've got something to say that isn't being heard, or if you're all too often alone in your thinking or feeling and you want to be heard, give me a call. Let's have a conversation, not just a 30-second soundbite. Hopefully, in allowing all voices to the table, we can actually find real solutions that work instead of pat answers that leave us wanting more, or emotional reactions that make divisions even worse. Perhaps in listening you'll find another kindred soul, or begin to see things differently yourself, or clarify your own position, even if in opposition. This week, I chose to speak to a particular population that I believe is all too often outnumbered and overlooked, that of our youth. And the topic I chose to talk to them about is one that has affected them greatly, but one where their voices often get sidelined and overshadowed by the so-called experts. So today, I chose to let them be the experts. Let them weigh in on the conversation. I'm talking about ADHD, a so-called mental disorder that an estimated 6.4 million children are diagnosed with every year, with a 42% increase in the last 8 years alone. The average age of diagnosis is just 7 years old. A significant portion of these children are often prescribed Ritalin or Adderall or other drugs that some critics argue are nothing more than amphetamines that are highly addictive with damaging long-term effects to a developing brain. Boys are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls. Children in poverty are also at greater risk. But get this, English-speaking children are at a 4 times greater risk. So, I decided to ask a few young adults what they think. Those who have ushered in this 42% increase over the last 8 years. Now that they're older, I asked their opinions about this growing epidemic. I mostly felt it was important to just sit back and listen. Do you think we're overprescribing is happening, or we're giving kids drugs maybe too soon?
Yeah, I think so.
I definitely think so. Like, I don't know, that it's really hard to say because I haven't known too many people that are being prescribed as much, but I know, like, through my course that I've been doing, they've been talking about it. Like, you have to know the child and don't just fix it with drugs, because that does not fix the issues.
And I think, like, both of us, once we get into our actual professions, like, we'll see that a lot. Like, you with teaching and me with social work. It's like, well, that's actually going to be probably something that you have to talk to parents about, or that I have to, like, actually assess.
And a lot of it as well is, like, the parents don't really want to deal with it, and you've got to sort of look at what it is at home. That's the problem. Like, why is this child acting up? I had a student one time on my placement, and he was obsessed with attention, and he wasn't allowed to hug you unless he asked first and stuff, and he seemed like he had ADHD, but it really, like, he had issues at home and had been abused and everything, and then just obviously didn't get proper attention. So you wouldn't deal that with drugs, you have to deal that with therapy and, like, just talking about it with the child. But
I think, like, conclusions are almost jumped to, like, with, like, if a child's acting up, actually assessing the whole circumstance. And like, in social work we talk about, there's like 4 different kind of, like, interactions with different like the physical, but also the emotional, and, like, all that sort of stuff, to actually realize what's going on with the individual. And I think sometimes you just kind of single out the physical and don't look at actually the environmental and the emotional things behind it, and you're just, like, kind of responding to one thing and trying to work out, or trying to stop that one thing when there's, like, this whole trail behind it.
And I think also, as a society, we don't like waiting for things. Like, you want the fast internet, you want that, and so you want the quick fix, when really that could be doing more damage than good.
Yeah, and on that, like, people want just the kid to be better or to not be in pain right now, but like, they're kind of sugar-coating it and just giving it that, this is stopping it right now, but not looking at how it's going to be effective in the long run.
Yeah. Have you seen anybody that you know that started on drugs and you feel like was maybe more damaged by drug use than...
I don't think anyone in my life in particular.
Mine's really only, like, Ryan. It was a lot before I was dating Aaron, so my boyfriend. His brother, so the one who had bipolar, ADHD and all that. Before he was diagnosed, he went into, like, really big drug use and things like that, and he had a lot of friends that passed away due to it, and then when he started getting help, he's a bit obsessed now with drugs and making sure he's getting the best that he can and stuff like that, and experimenting sometimes with different medication. That can cause problems, and you can see when he's on I forgot the word, like, when he's on a high and he wants to buy everything, you're like, maybe these drugs are a bit wrong. But then sometimes you hear him go, like, I'm sick of not feeling, because he has struggle feeling, but he's gone off them before and it was just even worse. So it's a bit like, sometimes you do need it and sometimes you don't. Like, but no, we don't. I never was around anyone who had drug use when they were young. I don't know if that's more of a new thing.
But you said your brother had ADHD. They thought he was going to be. I mean, your
boyfriend's brother.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. But because my mum's a bit like, she doesn't believe in any of that. Like, even with immunisations, like, I never got immunised as a child because mum was just like not thinking that they did any good. So mum was never going to get him tested, especially because that would then mean that they may recommend a drug or something, and she just didn't want him known for having ADHD, because I think that, like, that kind of changes people's frame of mind as soon as they read that, like, having kind of that perception of what that is. And she didn't want him to have to deal with that side of it, but then also, like, it would mean that he would probably be on some sort of prescription drug for most of his life, and she didn't want that either. So if it wasn't actually going to be an issue, and if it wasn't something that she could see herself, then she didn't see it as something worth checking out.
And today he's... How is he now?
Totally, like, I would not even question whether he had ADHD. Like, he's not like that at all. He's just like like, not at all, like, introverted, a bit of a gamer, but like completely like normal guy. Like, I don't know how else to describe him, I guess. I was just going to say, like, my best friend was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and a few other things a couple years ago, and she was put on, like, all this prescription stuff, put on, like, sleeping tablets because she couldn't, she had insomnia, but chronic fatigue, and it was, like, this weird mix, and she got put on all this stuff, and then in the last, like, maybe 2 years, she's actually had, like, been coming off all these drugs really slowly, and her withdrawals have actually kind of been just as bad or or worse than what the initial things were in the first place. Like, it's just been insane to watch.
Yeah, that's what happened. My boyfriend he has depression, and it's something that he's faced a long time, but he was on a drug and then got tired of not feeling as much, and then he had to get off it really slowly, and then he still gets really bad lows, but like it's more like a this instead of a this, like but his brother, who's the one who got bipolar, he's actually celiac, so when he was given Ritalin, he got really sick, and then he couldn't absorb anything, and then his bipolar drugs weren't working properly, and he went into a deep depression because he like had that sudden cut off from his drugs, and so it was something really bad, and he was in a really bad place for like months, and it took a while to realize that the Ritalin was a wheat product. And then he sort of got really angry because the doctors should have known that, and they knew that he was celiac, and he's one of the worst kinds of celiac. Like, he gets very, very sick for even crumbs.
Yeah.
I think that's also something that I've noticed that doctors aren't necessarily paying attention to when they prescribe things, is like ingredients within it. Like that.
Yeah.
Even like I went on the pill for like pain reasons, and the pill that I was prescribed has lactose in it, and I'm lactose intolerant. So then I started reacting to my pill because of what, like, my doctor knew I was lactose intolerant, yet she prescribed it to me anyway. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it was, it certainly resonated for me and my own dad's. My dad was diagnosed bipolar, and when I read the book, it's like, whoa, this explains a lot that I didn't understand. I thought I was seeing a disease, but the disease never resonated entirely because that really wasn't who my dad was.
Yeah.
But once he was on the drugs, I could almost go so far as to say he became almost a different person on the drugs than he was off the drugs. Yeah, and then, I mean, it becomes they put him on so many, they layer the drugs and the side effects and the diagnoses to such a degree that what's recognizable one thing from another. And it's something that should be taken a lot carefully, and it's not taken carefully enough. Like, it's not getting enough research, and like I feel like doctors don't tell you everything. I have a really good doctor, and she, like, when I was just going on the pill, but she printed out all this information, read through this first and understand the side effects, make sure you read the book inside the pill, and I did have, because they say the first 3 months you're on this one because it's one of the strongest ones, because I have uneven hormones. She was they were like, read the book, and I had all the minor side effects, and if I didn't read this, I would have been like, what's going on with me? I was having major anxiety, I was like struggling with everything, getting a lot of pain, and like, then after the 3 months it just went, and everything went back to normal. It was really strange, but like, if she wasn't going to tell me all that stuff, well, then I would have had no idea, and I would have thought I was actually possibly suffering from anxiety, and then possibly going on from that to have another another drug and so forth. Do you think it's possible that could have happened with your your boyfriend's brother?
No, so he had a very bad childhood as well, because he was acting, he had such a, I'm not doubting in my mind at all, he's definitely bipolar 100%, but when he didn't get diagnosed till he was in his 20s, and so he had a very bad childhood because his parents took it as disobedience instead of, and he would have deep depressions of going into bed, and then he's staying in bed for days, and his parents would see that just him not helping and him not doing that, so they had a very rough upbringing from it. So that, I would say, that would play more into who he is than his the drugs and stuff. And he has to that family's got a lot of issues.
I don't know, it's a complicated thing.
He was saying that if like the doctors even keep giving people these drugs, it can affect the kids what they have later.
And just doing drugs in general, like, it rewires everything. And I don't know, it's like all this stuff with ADHD, and then like these kids, they have all these problems, and especially if it's not necessary. Like if you're in like excruciating pain, or if you're like dying or something, like you would need it to survive, then sure. But what about you? What would you say about all this stuff that we were talking about?
I told you if you
No.
talk
You can talk too.
my English.
You speak amazing English.
No. I just think, here in America, they have a lot of, like, I'm from Russia, and we don't even have, like, psychoanalytic or whatever. It's not that popular because, like, everybody just talking with the family or friends. And sure, in here, like, a lot of kids and teenagers, like, going to the doctors, and if they have a problem, they're, like, taking a pills or something. Like, our friend, like, your friend from this, she was taking a pills, like, to study, like, more.
Oh yeah.
To focus on this, and this feels like, other people using it on the bad way, like,
Like in what way? What do you mean bad way?
They become addicted.
Yeah.
Adderall and all these things. Yeah.
And you've seen that?
That's what she's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No. All my friends at school, like, would take that as well, like, before exams and all this stuff. And I just think it's like so stupid.
And there's a lot of ways, like, to get relaxed or something, like to go see the nature or something. Then you just taking the pills and try to relax or like go to sleep or whatever.
So you're
See the nature,
Yeah.
meditate or something.
And you're from Russia, and you're from UK.
Yeah.
The UK. And do you think this is a kind of uniquely American problem, or do you see it in your country?
In the UK, it's kind of the same thing. The UK is basically like the US in almost every way, except that it's better. But it's the same stuff there. I think people do slightly less drugs in the UK, like just generally because it's harder to come by. But yeah, it's also like a thing that is a problem over there too, I think.
What are the kind of drugs you see kids do? Adderall? What other drugs?
Me?
Yeah, have you
Everything.
seen everything? Like
I've seen people do everything, or people I know do everything.
like
Lots of different drugs, from simple stuff like popping loads of painkillers to like doing heroin and cocaine and all this stuff too. I've been around all of that stuff.
Do you ever think some of these psychiatric drugs lead to heroin addiction?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Then you start like, oh, this helped me. Like, you have to do your own research too, and like try to avoid it. But when the people like start taking it and they feel like relief or something, maybe it's goes for the first time and they're looking for something more.
I keep seeking that out, I think, yeah. Especially at school, like, people are so stressed. Like, I know lawyers that are like, take heroin every day just so they can keep studying at law school. And kind of, you know what I mean? Like, people, especially in America, it's so much stress. It's like,
even it's not
survive
true.
on that.
Like, so many people like have a worse life, and here people like think they
it's so
have a bad
stupid, and
life,
people
and
smoke
they just-
weed and they just like, they
But
waste
they
their
don't-
life. They can do anything they want in this world. They're Americans. And, you know, yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I live
And-
in California, and there's the like the same thing. Like, every people, like, even like who you wouldn't think they like smoke or do drugs, like they do, and like they do it from an early age too.
Like, what's the earliest age you've seen this or known about it happening?
14, maybe 15.
Yeah. In the UK, it was very early, from about 14 or 15, my friends.
And did they start with pot, or was it the psychiatric drugs, or
Usually weed and pills, like, they started off with, and then they just got worse and worse. You know, they kind of, there's that thing as well where they try to make everyone else do it too, like, oh, you should join me, come and do it, oh, smoke this weed from this apple, it's cool, bro, or whatever. Like, I don't know, yeah. Oh, I'll get good grades in this exam, you know, I'll help you out, like, I don't know, yeah.
And did they have them prescribed and were diagnosed and stuff? Is that how they were
Some
getting
of
them?
yeah, like
Or how did they
some
get
of them have like ADHD or whatever, and then they just abuse that or whatever. I don't know.
Do you believe in ADHD?
I believe it's a thing, but I don't believe that giving pills is the right solution to fix that.
There's a lot of different ways, to
Yeah.
avoid it. Like.
I think that taking drugs, if you have a problem, is like just for any old reason, that I think is not right.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been curious. How about Xanax? Do you see much about Xanax happening out there?
Not as much, but I have heard of it too. Yeah.
Or do they combine? Have you seen them combining?
Yeah, they combine it, and some of my friends I've seen they grind it up, they sniff it. Like, I've seen all sorts of abuse of those prescription drugs.
Mm-hmm. Like, what's the worst thing you've ever seen?
The worst thing I've ever seen? What do you mean?
Like, the worst thing they did with it. Took 20 or, I don't know, combined it
Yeah, they've definitely abused it.
To sell it to other people.
Sell it to other people. I've seen a lot of them.
And like
doing
take,
that.
unnecessary, like,
Yeah.
But, and where
not
they...
just when they feel pain, whenever they want to, like, they do that.
They
And
just
there's,
become numb.
yeah, so many, like, good things you can do. You can go skiing and, like, just go out and, like, do some stuff. And it's just wasting the time.
Mm-hmm. And where are they getting these pills most of the time?
I have no idea.
From
the doctor or from their friends or from, like, there's like underground businesses and drug deals and all that stuff that goes on too. Where I live and also here, I know a lot of that stuff too. If I wanted to, I could easily seek out all that stuff.
You are listening to Dialogue. We'll be right back after these short messages. And welcome back. We're talking to the youth about ADHD. I had the pleasure of meeting a wonderful young woman, and it's her birthday today. She's from the United States. So far, we've listened to perspectives from people who are outside the United States. We had some Australian young women, and then we had a couple of people from the UK and Russia. And now we're going to get one gal's view from the American perspective. She was able to take the time out of her busy schedule to stop and just have a conversation.
I think that, at least in ADHD, among young people, it's severely overdiagnosed and misdiagnosed. I think that it's too accessible. I know when I was around 12 or 13, I went into my own doctor and tried to get diagnosed with ADHD because I felt like I wasn't performing as well as I could. I think that when information about drugs are advertised in the way that they are in the States, it allows young people to kind of believe that they have something that they don't. I think that there's bigger flaws in the educational system, and they're being treated with pills that are horrible and addictive. I've known several people that have become horribly addicted to ADHD medicine at extremely young ages, and a lot of times it's their parents who bring them in for that, and it creates lifelong damage. I think that learning disabilities should be treated in a manner that has a greater longevity and isn't as harmful. But I think it's terrible, and I think it's really addictive, and it has a huge presence in school systems nowadays. I don't know what it was like 10 years ago, but it's everywhere, and students really turn to that very easily. So when I was like 13, I knew several people who had prescriptions to like whatever, Adderall, Vyvanse, whatever, and I convinced myself that I had a learning disability of some sort, and I went in with the intention of getting a prescription and not even getting, proper care. It's very bad.
Did the doctor prescribe them, or did they not?
They actually didn't. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but I think they wanted me to go see a psychiatrist or something, and then at that point I was just like, no, never mind. I don't want to go through that because I had a bad experience at the time. I didn't want to go see a psychiatrist, but yeah, no, it's a huge problem, and it's basically, from what I understand, speed, and I think that in the society we're kind of growing up in, my generation, stimulants are very attractive, whether it be very unnatural, in a pill, or natural as in coffee or stuff like that. So it's very dangerous, and I don't think that it should be allowed, in kids younger than 15. I know kindergartners that have been prescribed Adderall, and at that point it's how do you even know if a kid has ADHD, 6 or something.
So you said you had a bad experience. You didn't want to go to a psychiatrist because you had a bad experience. So would you mind sharing some of that, or?
Well, I think at the time, most young teenage women, I was experiencing, depression and anxiety, and I was just going through a lot, and I had kind of been forced to go see a psychiatrist by my father, around that same time, 12, 13, and I went and saw the doctor for the ADHD shortly after that, so I had a bad taste in my mouth. I just didn't want to do that.
Did she prescribe drugs in any way to you?
She didn't. I just saw her once, and it was kind of just it was a very simple sit that we had. She just asked me a couple of questions, and I told her that I wasn't interested in taking anything, that I wanted to figure out my problems for myself. But yeah, and I think that young people go through things like that, and it's very important for us to go through hardships. They're very formative to our character and our development, and I think that a lot of times young people aren't given that opportunity, whether it be by themselves or pressures that they feel from their peers or their aspirations, and we're just so quick to turn to pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, it's obvious in the numbers. The consumption that the U.S. contributes to is astounding. It doesn't make sense. I don't know exactly, but I think that we're far ahead of every other country in the world. And also, I believe that medication is, it's not legal to advertise medication in most countries, or at least some bigger countries like Europe. And I know, from a psychological standpoint, obviously the mind is very powerful, and when things like that are fed to you on an almost daily basis, depending on what your situation is, you're going to start, you're going to believe that something is wrong with you, whether it be what the television is telling you, or just something that you're struggling with as a person. I think that there are greater alternatives to pharmaceutical drugs for attention deficit disorders, meditation being a huge one. I think that that's something that's helped me personally, from a very fundamental point. So I would like to see methods like that be kind of advertised and promoted, rather than just these pills. I think that a lot of doctors out there do strive to find alternatives for young people, and I appreciate that. But I think that there just needs to be a better education around what these pills do to kids. And I think that, I'm not sure what the whole process is these days, but I would certainly hope that if a minor is getting prescribed something like that, then their parent, guardian, and person are fully educated on the symptoms and the long-term effects of these things. A close friend of mine was like heavily addicted, and his mother made him take the pills. He couldn't really function without them for years fully. So that's extremely sad to see.
Did he ever get help or get off of them?
He did get off of them, but it took a while, and he, last time I spoke to him, he was still struggling with just sitting through a college class and being able to perform, you know, at an average level. And I know that he still mentally wanted them. And it's a drug, you know, I don't believe in drug use. From caffeine to amphetamines, I think it's wrong. I think that it's not helpful, but I'm not a doctor, and I don't fully know how the medication is supposed to interact with actually, you know. I think that if more people had a better understanding of how the brain actually works and how it responds to what we want and what we need and what we see, then a lot of problems would be fixed. Yeah. I think that everybody should have a psychologist. Definitely.
Yeah. To help them.
Yeah, I think that everybody would benefit from having a psychologist, so that they would have an educated, you know, somebody who's fully educated in the subject or very educated in the subject, let them know why they're feeling what they're feeling, and maybe they would have the ability to understand their hardships better from a more scientific point of view, and they wouldn't just run to you know, drugs, whether they're prescribed or not prescribed, to help them with what they're feeling. I think that most young people aren't educated in that very much, and so therefore, like, they see people doing better around them, or they see people, you know, or they hear about people who have like ADHD, and they just think that they have it, and so they want to be the best that they can, they want to do the most that they can all the time. Everybody I know who's in my age bracket, you know, 18 to 21 or whatever, everybody's doing 5 things at once, and that's not productive and that's not sustainable. And when that runs out, when that sustainability and that energy runs out, we're sitting here just thinking that something's wrong with us, but it's really, you know, there's just something wrong with our routine. It's not possible most of the time, in my opinion.
Do you believe in these diagnoses? Do you believe in ADHD, that it's real, or do you ever think it's, you said initially you feel like some people are getting misdiagnosed?
I don't think that I am educated enough in the topic to say that I don't think it's real, but I think that ADHD is a symptom of our society's current mindset on how things should be done and how much should be done. I think that too much is asked of us in a lot of ways. I think that the world is very different than it was 50 years ago. I don't think that ADHD was as popular back then. I think that our diet contributes a lot to our lack of attention. I think that that's something that's ignored. Schools serve their kids sugar in everything, Sugar, to my understanding, affects the attention greatly. You know, it's stuff like that. You know, you're feeding your kids crap, you're putting sugar in them, and you're wondering why they're not being able to pay attention, you know, in a class. And to me, like, if you're going to prescribe somebody something for ADHD, you need to fix everything else leading up to that. That should be a last case resort, like, or, you know, like a last resort.
Do you feel like a lot of kids your age share your point of view on the system, kind of the current model that we're working under now in terms of mental health?
I think that most people would agree, but I think my age would agree with me.
With you,
But I don't think that most people my age think about it. I've come a long way as an individual, and I often look back on my life and my feelings and what I went through, and I kind of look at it from my perspective now, which is much clearer and stable and healthy and happy. And I just see that there is a lot wrong with what we're told and what we're given and what's suggested to us. And that's just my opinion, and everybody, you know, things work for people differently, but I just think that those are serious drugs, and that children should not be given those because it hinders their development into a healthy, strong adult, very much so. I think that if I would have been prescribed, if I would have been diagnosed and treated in a pharmaceutical sense with ADHD at 12 or 13 when I initially went in, I would have been a completely different person, and I'm happy that I wasn't. So
you talked about you had a sort of forced episode where you were forced to see a psychiatrist. How did that feel, or how did that make you feel?
Well, there was a lot of things that contributed to that. I've always, since a young age, I've had an interest in psychology, and at that point I just wanted, you know, I was a 12-year-old girl, like I just wanted to figure things out for myself, and I didn't want somebody else in my head because I think I was lying to myself in a lot of ways, so I didn't want to hear the truth. And then I was kind of just given an ultimatum. It's like, go do this or leave, and I'm a very stubborn person, so that just didn't really jive with me. But I remember even during that session, that fourth session, I thought the woman was great, and I thought that, like, it was amazing, but I just made a conscious effort to resist and be stubborn. So during the session it was fine, after the session it was fine, and I had no ill regards towards the woman who was speaking with me. It was more towards, you know, my father, who initiated the session. So
Do you think had the practitioners been more open, that would have made a difference, that you wouldn't have been as resistant if you had a different therapeutic model, instead of, you know, we're going to force you to go whether you like it or not? They actually just sat down and said, actually, we're just concerned and we want to hear what's on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, and the practitioner, like, really did express that, and she was amazing in every way. It was more just like a personal family situation that kind of screwed things up for me at the time. And I was like a 12-year-old girl, like every 12-year-old girl out there will understand, I think. So it was, the practitioner was great, and I was very lucky, I think, to go see somebody as amazing as I did. I don't remember her name or anything, but
if you hadn't had somebody like that, and say they had been more forceful in their approach, or said, well, we're going to put you on these drugs and we're going to mandate that you take them whether you like it or not because we think you're unstable, we're determining that you're unstable, how do you think that would have made you feel?
Oh, I think me personally, that would have really been extremely negative to me, I think I would have, I'm not sure what I would have done, because I obviously didn't go through that situation, but it would have been bad, and I probably would have resisted to my fullest capacity. I think I would have like ran away, hurt myself, turned to, abuse. I would have turned to substance abuse, possibly. I would have dropped out of school, most likely. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't follow through. I realize that some people out there probably have experienced that, and my heart goes out to them. I think that can really destroy somebody's life. I think that somebody else's consciousness and mind is the most difficult thing to fully understand, and you really have to take the time and effort, no matter how long it may be, a day, a week, or 10 years. I think it's necessary to see that out and not cut it short, and try different things on people's brains, try medications, adjust medications. I think that's very detrimental to somebody. And I mean, with my friend who had been prescribed Vyvanse since he was in grade school up until he was in high school. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, but I think it had a hugely negative impact on his life, and I think that it still does, and I think that without proper care or consideration, it will continue to affect him for his whole life, and that's heartbreaking to me personally.
In what way did it ruin? I mean,
well, he was addicted to a substance. Now off the substance, he feels like he can't perform, he can't concentrate. I've seen that he obviously has a much harder time than I do to do those things. He constantly wants the substance or the medication. He has emotionally, he's not as healthy as I would wish him to be, and I assume that it has some connection to his previous use of Vyvanse, the ADHD medication, I believe. And like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm not sure if there's a connection, but I really believe it, and I think that somebody's mental health and well-being and happiness is the foundation for their whole life, and I think that has been chipped away at given his experience with that diagnosis. I think that all of these labels, such as ADHD and anxiety and juvenile bipolar, they're all just words, and they're being attached to something that is so much more than that, to feelings, and we are so different as people that it's negligent to suggest and provide something so harmful and definitive to something that is limitlessly indefinitive. I think that you can't prescribe something to something that's not even fully understood, and can't even be backed up scientifically when you define science as it is. Being young has many advantages and disadvantages when trying to make sense of and work through difficult situations and ideas, such as, does ADHD exist or not exist? Other mental illness, do they exist or not exist? When you're young, you have the ability to listen to yourself at a higher frequency, perhaps. I think as you grow older, you just naturally are more conditioned to believe certain things or what's being told around you. I also think that in a way, your energy for innovation is depleted a bit because you're so overloaded with different responsibilities and structures that you're told to adhere to. And yeah, being a young person, I had a greater sense of self in a way. I was quicker to believe, to go with my feelings, my intuitive thoughts, and you just believe in yourself more. You believe what you're feeling. You think that I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me, and you're very adamant about that, and it's beautiful. And but you also kind of struggle with, well, maybe I don't know because I'm so young. These people who are older than me are telling me, this is what's happening. It's a chemical imbalance. It's science. You just don't understand because you're not a doctor. You didn't go to school for this. When really, everything in you is telling you that you're okay, and that what the doctor or whomever is saying is a lie. You have a greater sense of self, but you're being told by people who are older than you that you're wrong. And I think me being who I was, I believe that I was like pretty logical in my decisions. I always struggled with, well, maybe I am wrong, maybe these people are right, maybe I just don't have enough experience, maybe I'm just being stubborn. You always hear about youth being stubborn or oblivious or ignorant to certain things, and I never wanted to be seen as ignorant as a young adult, so I second guessed myself quite a bit. But looking back, I'm very happy with my decision to listen to myself, because I have grown into somebody who's very proud of who they are and happy every day, and mentally I think I'm, in a very good place. And I was able to figure that out for myself rather than listening to somebody. I don't think that anybody could ever know what another person is thinking. It's impossible, in my opinion. You can never put those feelings and experiences into words or into a system. And to try and do that, there will be errors along the way. And I think that the danger that comes with these errors is inexcusable and is a civil rights issue, without a doubt. Long term, we are killing a beautiful part of our humanity, and it's kind of astonishing to me that we have come this far and nothing has been done. What I strive for in myself is to be a lifelong self-educator. I define intelligence through self-understanding. I think in order to be intelligent in any subject or in any matter of life, you must first have a good, solid understanding of who you are and why you develop the opinions and thoughts and feelings that you do. If you don't understand that, then I don't think that you have a true, you're not able to really recollect things in a very true way, because it will always be fogged in emotion or other people's opinions. I think it's important to develop that relationship within yourself, and once you do that, once you kind of understand how you work, you're able to see how other people work, and therefore you can determine or you're able to kind of source the differences and realize that although we act different and we want different things, and we look different and we strive for different things, we're all kind of coming from the same place. And personally, I've been able to use that throughout my life very effectively, very often. I think that the best way for us to learn as humans is to make the connections in our own way, at our own pace. I think the reason institutionalized learning is put on a pedestal is because we as a society, as we are now, have an issue with self-discipline. So therefore we turn to structured learning, where we pay, we use our hard-earned money or other people's hard-earned monies, and that kind of keeps us mentally in line, or we just don't have the self-discipline to make the changes in our diet or, our day-to-day life to help ourselves mentally. But what I strive for is just to continue to live life at my own pace and develop the self-discipline necessary to do all these things for myself, and run with it. I think that the best way to learn is just to do it yourself. Read things that you find interesting, go out and practice in the way that fits you and the way that you think. And I've done that with certain things, and it's been beautiful, and it resonates much more and for a much longer period of time, in my opinion, for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's very interesting. I wonder if a lot of young people your age have that kind of take on education these days.
I think it's growing a bit, but the notion of not going to school necessarily, because maybe 50 to 60 years ago, whatever, there was a very strict model that people stuck to, and it was you went to school, you graduated high school, and then if you were a woman, sometimes you just got married, sometimes you went to school. If you were a man, you were supposed to get a career, get a degree, support a family, have a house, have a car. That was the model. And in a lot of ways, that model has really hindered us. Many people are in debt now. Many people are unhappy because they were never able to live their full life. Many people are injured because they were, they just went to service, the country perhaps, and because it was a duty, and now they're not able to live normal lives because of it. But these days, I think it's more common for people to be more entrepreneurial in the way they live. I think that it's a growing trend for young people to not go to school and kind of figure out what they like to do and capitalize off of that. Often it's in 5 different areas of life and business. And so it's overwhelming in that way. But I think it's a growing emergence. I think that many young people are kind of trying to figure things out for themselves more rather than listening to people. I think that's also, just a symptom of our lack of attention here in life. We just don't have the patience to commit ourselves to, years of just listening to people. Not that college or school is just listening, but I think it's a growing trend, and I think in many ways, arguably most ways, it's positive, and I just hope that my generation has the ability and the will to better ourselves and better our future history, and really learn from the mistakes, or just learn from the experiences of our parents and our grandparents, I don't think that we want that for ourselves, and I don't think that we want to be brain dead, when we're 60. And I think that my generation is beautiful because we want to be who we are, however we are. And I think that my generation is beautiful because we're not afraid to fight for that. And I think that's obvious in certain movements, whether it be pertaining to our sexuality or our belief in equality, I guess, across the board. And I think that's a great stepping stone, and I hope that we continue to go forward with that, and really tackle some of the biggest issues in our country, which are pharmaceutical drug use, misdiagnosis, over prescription. The numbers are there, the science are there, people know about it, but I think a greater attention needs to be focused on it as a whole. We should all be focusing on this. These are our lives, these are our children's lives, and it's really the life of everything that surrounds us. If our minds aren't right, if our intentions aren't right, everything is going to fall apart sooner rather than later, I would imagine.
And that is an extraordinary young voice to bring to the table. It belongs to Alexa, and today is her 21st birthday. Happy birthday, Alexa, and thank you for spending the time it took to share your wisdom and thoughts with us. And thank you, the listeners, for doing just that today, listening. See you next week, Friday at 5, right here on Dialogue.